on the NATO summits. $55.5 million. What else could he have done with that money? He could have had an art program for schools that need it. He could have clinics for people who are sick. He could have public housing for people who don't have homes. He could have more public employees giving us jobs.
More public employees getting his job.
But instead what he does is, he invites the warmongers of NATO, who are responsible for 70% of arms purchases worldwide, who are responsible for an 11-year occupation of other countries, who's responsible for bombing multiple other countries, and brings them here to our town without asking us. That shows who he cares about. Not working people, but war criminals. He brings those war criminals to Chicago, puts them up in nice hotels, wines and dines them, takes them to special cultural events, orders police beat us in the city of Chicago. Whose side is he on? Repeat that. Whose side is he on? Not ours. He's not on the side of the people. He's committing war on the people. And we fight back. Let me enumerate a few more reasons why we just love our Mayor 1%. Mayor 1% is facing a $700 million budget deficit in our Board of Education next year. A $500 million public transit deficit. Mayor 1%, when he was in Congress,